You're listening to the Be Better Off Show by Kelly+Partners.
Well, welcome to the Be Better Off Show, where we find great Australians, interesting people and people on the move to share with us how to be healthy, wealthy and wise, or at least a bit more of each of those things. Today, we've got a really special guest, Stuart Diver, the General Manager of Thredbo, a survivor of a Thredbo disaster, and the host of the Element Podcast. And so for all of our listeners, I'd love you to listen to the Element Podcast, where Stuart will share with you during our interview about how he shares stories of great survival. So welcome, Stuart.
Thanks, Brett. Great to be here.
Hey, thanks so much for joining us. I always like to start at the beginning because the beginning is a good place to start. Where were you born? Grew up? Brothers and sisters?
Geelong. Geelong, yeah. One brother, mum and dad, Scottish, immigrated to Australia in the late 60s. So I grew up in Geelong for primary school years, then Melbourne for secondary school years.
So then what did you do post-school?
I went to university. So I went to RMIT in Melbourne and did a Bachelor of Applied Science in hotel management, actually. So it was a sort of a very broad degree. And then I left there, decided that I didn't really like being in pubs serving drunk people. I'd rather be on the other side of the bar. So I left there and went and did a traineeship with an outdoor education company in Victoria and worked with school kids for a couple of years, taking them rafting and abseiling and doing that sort of stuff. And then, in 1994, came up to Thredbo to follow my dream of being a ski instructor.
And so you come to Thredbo, you're in the mountains. Were you learning how to be an instructor? Were you a very advanced skier at that time?
I'd skied all my life with mum and dad. So I'd been pretty fortunate in that and sort of skied a lot in Victoria and in New South Wales. And, was fortunate enough to go overseas and do a bit of skiing with mum and dad as well. So, it was really just something that I'd wanted to do. I'd never expected it to be a career and something that I'd, was going to do for the rest of my life. I thought I'd come up to the mountains and spend a little bit of time here and see how it went. So to still be here all those years later is pretty special.
So that means you've been here 27 years, which is pretty phenomenal. What have you seen in terms of the development of winter sports and of national parks? And I guess with your hospitality background, the hospitality offering, how do you think of Thredbo today?
Yeah, it's an interesting one. It's definitely got bigger. I mean, as an example, when I started in ski school, it had 80 instructors, and now the ski school has 400 instructors. So the business has exponentially grown over the years, and with that, has come some fairly big infrastructure developments in Thredbo, of which we're just about to launch into another round of. I think the skiing demographics changed a little bit. I think it definitely used to be a very much elitist sport, and only those who are very wealthy could come. But I think, over the years, it's definitely diversified more, out into school groups and skiing, in some ways has become more affordable. But, what I love about Thredbo is, if I think about when I was a kid here in the 70s, all the way through, being here in the late 80s, early 90s, it's still that, awesome, beautiful community feeling of just a nice group of people. And I think that's what really attracts people to a place like Thredbo. It's the people. It's like any ski resort in the world. You can go there, you can have amazing snow, you can have, beautiful conditions, all of that sort of stuff. But what makes a really great day skiing or a great day in the mountains is the people. And I think that's really what makes Thredbo so special.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. Now, you've obviously told the story many times, the Thredbo disaster. You were there and survived. Obviously, many people didn't. When you look back now, and obviously how your new podcast, The Element, has come about, how do you think about that experience and how it's informed the rest of your life and the things that you're doing now?
Yeah, I mean, I think you can't go through no one can go through big traumatic events in their life and pretend that it didn't affect them or it's not with them, pretty well every day of their lives. And, my trauma was obviously, fairly large on a large scale and fairly public, but we all go through, little traumatic events or bigger traumatic events in our lives. And I think the real key is how you deal with those events. And I think you've only got two choices. And one is you just shut down, block out the world and hope that it all goes away and pretend that nothing's going on. Or you take it head on and you say, okay, unfortunate that I went through that, unfortunate that, for me, I lost my wife, as you said, 18 people died in the Thredbo Landslides. So it was hugely traumatic, but I tried to look at it and say, okay, through all that loss and that trauma, what is it that I'm living for? What is it that's driving me forward? And, I've spoken about that Thredbo community, your family, your friends. And I think that, one of the things that's driven me forward is it would be such a terrible waste of all of those people's lives, my wife, Sally included, if I didn't try and live my life in the most positive way that I can, and go forward. So I can learn from that experience, and I can say, what did it teach me about myself? What it taught me was that it's so important to use those negative experiences, try and find something positive, cling on to that positive and use that to drive you forward in your life every day. And that's what I've done.
Did you receive, as you say, some people have very large, very public situations, but many people have traumatic situations of more private, different types. I think mental health is more discussed than it was in the past, but did you receive formal counselling or some sort of trauma counselling, or what role did sort of professional assistance have in sort of you moving through that?
Yeah, I mean, I'm a massive advocate of mental health and looking after your mental health and using professionals to do that. And I was fortunate enough that I got pushed from Canberra Hospital. I use the word pushed because I was a 27-year-old male who thought I was invincible and could just get through anything on my own. But I worked out probably 6 months after the landslide in Thredbo that I couldn't do it on my own, and that drinking my way through it was not going to help. It was great at the time, but the mornings became very dark places to be. So I was fortunate. I went and saw a psychiatrist first. I didn't really have a form a bond with the psychiatrist. Came out, had another psychologist, and then finally found a psychologist who's Darren Wilson, who's still my psychologist today, and he's been with me for the last 24 years. An amazing guy who in those initial stages got me through the trauma, and obviously I've had a big go on in my life since then as well. And it's I'm the sort of person who I don't need to have, and I don't think you need to have the American style, therapist in the corner all day, every day. I think that if you go through something, it's like, if you break your leg, it's a simple one. You break your leg, you don't go down to Bunnings and get some plaster and whack it on and say it's fixed. I mean, you go and get an X-ray and you get a doctor to look at it and you put a cast on and you go from there. And I look at mental health in exactly the same way. If you've gone through a trauma, there's something that's gone on in your mind there that needs to be worked on. And I think that, that's where the stigma ended up coming from. It's like, it's in your brain, it's mental, we can't see it, so what's going on? But, I think, and that for society is sad. I think I agree with you. I think we're getting a lot better at it and having those discussions. So for me, I went and I got the tools that I needed. And the same thing happens now if I'm going through something traumatic in my life. And as you said, it doesn't have to be a landslide or a car crash. It can be, and it doesn't even have to, someone surviving cancer, it doesn't even have to be that big. It can be something really small in the day that tips you over, and you need to talk to someone about it. And my big one, mental health 101, is talking, which I'm good at and have always been able to talk. And but it's also that ability to listen. So when people are going through something, you've got to be able to listen to that person talking. And you don't need to offer advice. You don't need to do anything. You just need to be there for them. And psychology and mental health experts, what they have is they have that extra little toolkit to be able to give you the tools to then work on yourself, work on your mental health and get through it. And that's the only reason I'm here today. You can say that I'm as strong as, whatever. And the reality is I'm here because I did the hard work on my own mental health.
Yeah. As I've been doing my podcast over the last 6 months, I've been like, right, I'm not going to talk about COVID because it's over talked about, but it is a traumatic event for many people. It often can be a small thing that sets people off. They've had other pressures, other dramas, often untreated, probably unrecognised entirely. And then small things or large things can really set them off. And so for the people listening to our podcast, I think it's really great to hear, positively and practically what you can do when you find yourself in a difficult spot, which is not a question of whether somebody's strong or weak. It's just a reality that stuff happens and we all react differently at different times, even to the same things. So when you then, as you try to do your day-to-day life, day-to-day work, and I was really fascinated. I saw you came out with your Relevant podcast. I really want to talk about it.
Yep.
Having been through that trauma, what made you sort of go, launch a podcast, for our listeners again, it's called The Element.
Yep.
That's about something so traumatic as surviving, a disaster or a catastrophe.
Yeah, I mean, what interested me was to see were there any similarities between all the other people who'd been through traumas and survived and got out. That's what really interested me because, we're always, people who go through these, we're sort of sometimes put up on a pedestal and seen as being something special. And what I really wanted to prove is that these people, including myself, who get put in these situations and go through these extraordinary traumas or experiences and come out the other end, we're all just normal people. We just happen to be put in unfortunate situations. But what drove us to survive is what interested me. And it really, what it comes back to? It comes back to that every single person had a reason to live. Now, whether that was a loved one or whether that was because they wanted to, one of their core beliefs is that they wanted to really care for people or whatever it was, they had a reason to keep going on and getting through those horrific, being out in the middle of Bass Strait for 36 hours in a leaking life raft is, having lost two of your best mates out of that raft is, a horrific situation to be in. Yet, the positivity, when they've come out and you're talking about that's what really interested me because
is it conscious? Do you think what you're seeing now is it a conscious choice, an unconscious choice, brought on by adrenaline, or is it a psychotic moment where people just decide?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's a lot in it, and obviously it's all over time frames. But a lot of these people who survived, the stories in the elements, they all ended up having long periods of time there. So the human mind is amazing. Like it will take you away. With me, it took me away to these amazing places when I was nearly at the end and nearly had no more energy to go on, 50 odd hours of being buried underground in, those freezing cold conditions. It definitely took me away, made me escape. Then when I needed to be in reality, brought me back. The human mind is an amazing thing, but really a lot of these decisions of everyone to survive is conscious. Just because of the time frame, because you've got so much time to think about things. So you're truly processing why is it you're living. And, with me, I got pushed to these depths where I wanted to take my life. Like I wanted it to end. I could not go on, but I didn't have the means to do it. Now, if I'd had the means, would I have done it? Maybe I would have, maybe I wouldn't have. I don't know. So they're all conscious decisions you're making. And everyone in the podcast did the same. Like it was incredible how they processed it, thought through, some of them were in terribly critical situations themselves, but said, no, go and rescue everyone else first and then come back and get me, detrimental to them. But, that sort of stuff, they're conscious decisions, but they knew that they wanted to live and they wanted to get out. And then since getting out, if you look at all those people, sure, they have their low moments, but basically their love for life and their passion to go forward has definitely been enhanced by, they going through those traumatic experiences.
So there's those classic sayings of, make the most of every day. You don't know how much time you've got. The major religious traditions always, had ideas that time is limited, death is certain, There's sort of one way to heaven, you better get on with it type of ideas. How much of people coming out of these situations, is it a major idea that they come out knowing, well?
Yeah, I mean, it's an interesting one. I mean, I think that definitely drives people on to live, as you say, more positive lives and to do things. But it's like me. I mean, I don't wake up every morning going, oh my God, this could be my last. I've got to make it the best day ever. It's really funny, actually. Your life actually just goes back to pretty well normal. And I always said that when, after Thredbo, I always said, my aim was just to get back to having a normal life. And a normal life is exactly the same as your life, as everyone else's. We have those lows, we have our highs, we have the crap times, we have the good times. But I think what it does and what everyone, spoke about is it really does focus you on the things that are important in life. And everyone said the same, you get very sick, I suppose, of a word, one of a better word, of the trivial stuff. And so it really becomes clear what's important. So if that's family, if that's friends, if that's, your immediate family, loved ones, whatever it is, that's what drives you forward, and that's what provides the positivity in your life. And I think if we're looking, I use that to look at, how we're going in society now. I think we're definitely focusing on the wrong things. I think we're focusing on, material assets. We're focusing on, my social media profile and how many likes I've got, and, all of these things, which are basically really superficial. And we're just not spending enough time on working out, number one, what is it that's important to you? Sure, earning money is great because it gives you the tool to go and do things in your life. So I've got absolutely no dramas with that. I've got a great job, and, money gives me that freedom. But it's really important for me to know what it is in life that I'm living for, because that's what's going to drive us forward. And I think, we keep talking about resilient society and making our kids more resilient and whatever. The only way we're going to do that is work out what's important in life. And if the number of followers you have on Insta or whatever it is the only thing that's important in your life, then when something happens in your life, like a big trauma or something, or even a little trauma, you just don't deal with it because none of it's real. And then you realize that all of those people following you aren't there to actually support you. It's not that. And so, I sound a little bit preachy when I say it, but it's, I think as a society, we really need to work out what it is we're doing here. Where are we going in the future? So are the issues of, and this will sound very preachy, are the issues of climate change, are the issues of all of these things that are currently going on? COVID, we spoke about, there are massive things currently going on in the world. And I think we're going to see people majorly struggle, not just because of lockdowns, not just because of all of that, over the next few years, because we haven't got the tools to deal with it. We are not sure actually what we're living for, what's important to us. I think the superficiality will be drawn to the fore, and we'll realize actually there's a hell of a lot more important things in life. And I hope that is the outcome as we go forward.
So when people listen to, so do you think that that you hope that the listeners of your podcast, The Element, come away with, what isn't common these days, but with an experience that forces them to reflect on, who am I and what am I living for?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think the number one aim of the podcast is to inspire people, show that you can go through great hardship in your life and come out, number one. But I also hope people look at that and say, wow, that guy lost everything in the bushfires, or that person, survived Cyclone Tracy, or, survived the Newcastle earthquake. They're big things in their life, yet they've been able to come out, whether it's 10, and that's what I like about, it's the time frame of these, some of these things were a long time ago, yet these people have still been able to live decades of a really positive life, still going strong, and they're all inspirational in their own right. And I hope that that's what people get from it, because I think you're right. I think we do need to reflect more, not just on ourselves as individuals, but on ourselves as an Australian society, and what is it that we're really doing here? What's important? Because what you note in all these common traumas is and tragedies as Australians, we always band together in times of need. We are unbelievably good at it. Show me a war, show me anything. We are just unbelievable, but it seems to be when that's not there, we really go back into our own individual worlds. And I think, imagine if we could just band together like that all the time. What an incredible society and community we'd have to be able to, say, okay, so-and-so might be hurting a little bit, so we're all going to band around and we're going to help them. And then there's cultures in the world who do it really, really well. I think Western culture doesn't do that well. I think we've definitely made ourselves a great group of individuals. And I think that, I hope that people get, that inspiration, that message out of listening to others tell their story.
Yeah, there's no doubt. In Western societies are deeply afflicted by individualism, materialism and hedonism. Most people don't even know what those things are today because our education system, barely teaches spelling. But a reflection on that would be helpful. And what attracted me so much to your story and the podcast is this idea that when, really bad things have happened to a lot of people for a long, long time, it's very much part of the human condition. And yet when you read the stories of the people who survived Viktor Frankl's Man's Search for Meaning, who survived the concentration camps, or I just read there's another great Jewish Holocaust survivor wrote a book called I think it's Happiest Man in the World, or it's a really great book. And these are all people who just decided that, notwithstanding how horrible the situations were, that there was something more that they were, here to contribute beyond themselves. So it very much resonates with me. I've often said to people, a real power question is, what do you live for? It stumps a lot of people. But, I hope people listening to the podcast today in their life and businesses ask that question, am I spending my time and my money aligned to the ideas that I think are the highest priorities and most important in my life?
Yeah, 100%. I think that, just to refer back to, all of that humans have an amazing spirit. I mean, we do have that common spirit. And I believe we've all got it. Like, I look at humanity and say, you know what, I do intrinsically believe that we are all good. There is obviously a little bit of evil there, but the vast majority of the population are. And so it's how do we get that out of people, and how do we really use that for the betterment of not just us as individuals, but, for all of society. And I think that's the real key when you're looking at what it is that, that you're living for, or, what it is that'll drive you forward, what motivates you, all of those sort of things. They can be very much individual little goals, but I think if they're based in a goal of something that's for the greater good, I think they're much, much easier to achieve.
And much more powerful. I agree. Yeah. Now, what's the future of skiing in Australia? Thredbo, share with us. While we've got you here, share with us the development plans. What comes next?
There's a lot. There's a lot on there. One of them is in exactly that, trying to future-proof us, is snowmaking. So obviously, snowmaking technologies and upgrades, capacity of that. We understand that the colder opportunities to make snow are becoming shorter. So therefore, if you double the capacity, at least we can make similar amounts of snow. So we're looking at doing that. That's pump house upgrades, all of that sort of stuff. All the rest of it is really infrastructure based in upgrading all of the lift system for higher capacity lifts, faster lifts, all of that. So, snow gums is the next one to go. Also talking about, snow and climate change and all of those things that may affect us, putting in year-round adventure activities. So we've got a DA just about to go in for an alpine coaster, which is a gravity roller coaster. So hopefully that'll be built in the next 18 months, which will be a spectacular little feature. Also looking at doing dual zip lines. So flying foxes, 7 dual zip lines off the top of the Cosy Express. So the top of the mountain all the way into the valley floor. Plus that, just got approval to build a whole new Merritt's restaurant conference facility at the top of the new gondola. Obviously, the gondola went in. So, we've got 5 to 10 years of major infrastructure upgrades and investments. And that's really to future-proof us as being, the premier year-round resort, not just in Australia. I want to be, my aim is for Thredbo to be the premier year-round boutique resort in the world. That's where I want to position us. And that's not saying make us elite and do whatever. We want to make it for everyone, but I want to make sure there's things to do year-round. Mountain biking's massive for us, so we're building, more and more mountain bike trails. So there's lots. It's really exciting. There's a lot going on.
Fantastic. Great to meet you. I really appreciate the time you've shared with us today. I want to call out Stuart Diver's podcast called The Element again to our audience to have a listen. I really recommend it to you. I think the content is deep and thoughtful, and frankly, hugely inspiring. So, Stuart, thanks so much for your time today. Have a great day.
Cheers. Thanks, Brett.
Thanks for listening to the Be Better Off Show. If you enjoyed this episode, don't forget to rate and review on Apple Podcasts.
Have a great day.